Oh, hello. Welcome to my February reading wrap up. I read 7 books in February and I'd like to tell you about them and let you know my thoughts on them. So, briefly, the 7 books I read, 2 of them were non fiction and 5 were fiction. So, that was great. This talks about the main major hormones in people's bodies and how they respond to certain behaviours and thoughts that we have going through our day-to-day life. And DOSE stands for dopamine. I always want to call it oxytocin, but it's not, is it? Oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So it goes through the sections of the book, split into 4 sections, one for each of the hormones, and tells you what the hormones do, what parts of the body they act on, what subdues the level of hormones going through a system and what raises it. So, say for dopamine, it's all about motivation and feeling positive, feeling energized. Yeah, so it tells you the things that will reduce your dopamine levels and what will increase it. A lot of scrolling on your phone, which I'm guilty of, as the rest of us probably are, will give you quick hits of dopamine. So you'll get that instant reward, instant gratification. But he talks about better ways of increasing dopamine, and that's by doing it slowly. So he talks about certain activities you can do in your day which will trigger dopamine, but it'll be a slow build up, and then you won't have that crash where you need to more now. It takes that sort of panic out of it, and the dopamine level will stay raised for longer. So he also talks about oxytocin, which is love and connection, not just with a romantic partner, but with anybody, and how touch and being in community can increase your oxytocin. And then he goes on to serotonin, and then finally endorphin. So it was a good book. I quite enjoyed it. It was a little bit repetitive, but it's the sort of book that I would like to dip in and out of every now and again, just to remind myself of the things I can be doing to improve my moods and my behaviours. So yeah, I would recommend reading it. But as I say, it is a little bit repetitive, so just be aware about that. But the basic information he gives you is very, very useful and can be sort of a foundation for habit forming. So forming good habits rather than bad. So yeah, I gave it, well, how many stars did I give it? I think I gave it 3 out of 5, but it was an interesting read. The next book that I read was a translation from Korean, Welcome to the Hunan Dong Bookshop by Korean author Hwang Bo-reum. I apologise if I'm saying that wrong. And it was translated by Shanna Tan. Now, I'd heard so much about this book. Every bookshop you went in had, copies of it on display. And it was a sweet book. I really enjoyed it, but it was a slow read. If you like plot-based books, this probably isn't for you. But if you like character study, then it's very good at that. It's got some nice characters who come into the story at various points with their own struggles, their own questions about the direction of their lives. And they form like this little community. So the main character is called Yongju, and she decides to leave a very high-pressured, stressful job and her husband and a busy life in Seoul, and she moves to the outskirts of the city and opens a bookshop, hence the title. And when she gets there, she's very miserable. She puts people off. She sits at her desk in the shop at the counter and cries, basically, which wouldn't encourage anybody to go into a bookshop, would it really? It's sort of gloomy. But over the period of the book, she sort of comes out of herself and she realizes what she wants and what's important to her. And as I said, various characters come into the story with their own issues. And she sets up this lovely community with book clubs and author talks. And yeah, it's really nice. Did it live up to the hype? Probably not for me. It was very enjoyable. It looks a lot, its sort of underlining theme is that it's looking at society's view of what success is and what work should be and how important it is in your life. And the characters in the book are struggling with that, really, and trying to find a way of life that fits better to them and their personalities. So yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it, but it didn't live up to the hype. So I gave it 4 out of 5. So it's pretty good. Yeah. The third book is actually a reread for me, which is rare because I hardly ever reread books. And I read this for the first time in 2017, and it was written in 2007. It's by the author Barbara Kingsolver. This is a non-fiction. You might know her name from the Poisonwood Bibles and other novels that she's written. Very good writer. But this is actually non-fiction, and it's about her commitment to buying local food and growing as much food as she can in her own garden. And she sort of co-opts her whole family into doing this experiment for 1 year to see how much they can grow themselves, how they can work with the seasons, and how they can get away from the standard American diet. They want to get away from the standard American diet, and they don't want to give more money to big corporations that are basically controlling what people eat. Now, this is just as relevant now as it was in 2007 and when I read it in 2017. We've still got all those issues with big food companies controlling what we eat and what goes in our food. She talks a lot about regenerative farming, and by shopping local, if you can, obviously it's quite a privileged position she's in to be able to do this, and her husband owns a farm that's been in the family for years, so they've got a lot of land. So they are very privileged to be able to do this, but you can still take away the basic ideas and apply them on a smaller scale, perhaps to your own life if you can. If you've got a little back garden or a balcony or an allotment or patch of ground down the side of your garage or something, you can still grow some food yourself if you want to, and that will be a great thing to do. Quality of our food and the expense of the food at the moment is just, the quality's going down and the price is going up, as I'm sure you all know. And we need to stop. I say we need to stop. I'm conscious that I need to stop buying so much pre-made food, ultra-processed food, and get back to seasonal eating, which is not only cheaper, but it's also healthier. So yeah, they go through this whole year, and there's little snippets from the daughters about how they're feeling, because they can't have everything they want to eat when they want to eat it. They either can't have it at all because they can't grow it, or they can't buy it locally, or it's not in season, so they have to wait until it's the right time of year, and then they can eat as much as they want, and then it's gone again. So you don't really get bored with stuff, because you can only have it for a few weeks and then it doesn't grow anymore. So yeah, it's a really good book. If you are interested in moving away from big food manufacturing and you just want some ideas about keeping money in the local community where you get more bang for your buck because it keeps cycling around the same small community rather than going to these big corporations. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars. I'm glad I reread it, and yeah, just as relevant now as it was when it was first published and when I first read it. Right, book number 4 was a book by Katie Lumsden. She has a YouTube channel which I really like. It's called Books and Things, and I'll list it in the description down below. This is her debut novel. She's since gone on to write another one, I believe, but I haven't read that yet. And her first novel, which is the one I read, is called The Secrets of Heartwood Hall. And I loved this. It was a real page turner. It was great fun, sort of gothic Victorian style of book. Had some really interesting characters in it and a good dose of creepy, which I quite liked. And the central character is a woman called Margaret Lennox, and she's a widow, and she goes to become a governess for a little boy called Louis in Heartwood Hall. Louis's mother, Mrs. Evesham, has got a bad reputation in the local village. Everybody thinks she's strange and they want to stay away from Heartwood Hall and not have anything to do with the people who live and work there. And Margaret goes to be the governess, and she gets to know the little boy Louis and really loves looking after him, but she can't help feeling that there's something strange going on in the house. And she confides in the gardener, who's called Paul, has an affair with him. And Paul's been there for years and years and years. So she keeps asking him what's wrong with the house, what's going on, and he won't tell her. And the story goes on, and eventually we find out what's happened in the past to all the characters in the book. And I really enjoyed it. It was great fun. I read it in 2 days, stayed up well past my bedtime to keep reading it. And yeah, I can't wait to get hold of a copy of her second book from the library. So I'll put her channel down below, as I said. And yeah, give it a go. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was brilliant. It was great fun. Then I read one classic per month challenge that I set myself last September. This month I chose My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. I already read Rebecca and loved that. So I thought, well, I'll give another one of her books a try. And I'd heard a lot about My Cousin Rachel, but never got hold of a copy. So I actually listened to this one on audiobook because that was how I could get a copy from my library. And it's creepy and slightly disturbing, and the characters are incredibly flawed. I think that's what Rebecca du Maurier, it's not that at all, is it? Daphne du Maurier is so good at in her writing. This follows a man called Philip, and he's an orphan, and he's raised by his much older cousin Ambrose, and he sets to inherit Ambrose's house and land when Ambrose dies. And they both love the house and have a very strong relationship. And then Ambrose decides that he's going to go to Florence, and while he's there he meets a woman called Rachel, and he falls in love with her and marries her. And this is where the story gets a bit creepy and a bit sinister, because Philip, who's actually a bit of a drip, he's not a nice character, but he's a bit wishy-washy as well. He suddenly becomes very jealous of Rachel's relationship with Ambrose and fears that because Ambrose is now married, even though he seemed like he was going to be a bachelor for his whole life, Philip was worried that, he would lose his inheritance, and he was just jealous that he hadn't got Ambrose's full attention. So the story goes on that eventually Rachel comes to England to stay at the house. Philip is determined to hate her. He's already decided he hates her and that she's a horrible woman. But as the story goes on, he starts to see her differently. So we go on to find out about how their relationship develops, about Rachel's background in Florence and the people she knew there, and her relationship with Ambrose and how it affects the will and the estate and, Philip's future. So yeah, they're horrible, they're just horrible characters, but yeah, but they're great because of that. And she writes so well. She writes, just gives you like a cold sensation down your spine when you read her books. And I'm glad I read this one. I've got a copy of Frenchman's Creek, which I'll get round to reading at some point this year. But yeah, I'm starting to love her books. That's 2 I've read now. They're great. So yes, My Cousin Rachel, I would recommend it. and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book was a book I got from the library, and it's by Claire Chambers. It's called Shy Creatures. I think a lot of people have read her book that came before this one called Small Pleasures. I've not read that yet, but I would like to, based on how much I enjoyed Shy Creatures. Now, Shy Creatures has just come out, I think, beginning of this year. Beginning of this year. And this again was a book that I really, really enjoyed. I couldn't put it down. It was great. It's about a lady called Helen Hansford, who's an art therapist at a psychiatric hospital. And she's having an affair with one of the psychiatrists called Gil. And they come across 2 people who the police have been called to see to after a disturbance. And it turns out to be a 37-year-old man called William Tapping and his elderly aunt, who are in this house. And they get taken to the psychiatric hospital where Helen and Gil work. And their story develops. Helen tries to find out the background of William, because when he goes in the hospital, he's mute. He's got a beard sort of down to his stomach. He's sensitive to light, as if he's never been outside. And we find out the background of why he's like that and how their situation with him and the aunt have come to be what they are. Very, very interesting book. Makes you think about confinement. Can we be confined when we're not physically confined? Can we be confined just because of how we think? It's about freedom as well, what we do with our freedom, whether we have control over our freedom, and kindness. And it was quite uplifting, but also quite tragic that the circumstances had to be what they were in the first place. So yeah, great book. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. And I think I will try and get hold of a copy of Small Pleasures and see whether I enjoy that one as much as this one. So Shy Creatures I gave 5 stars to. And the final book that I read this month, another one that's just come out recently, Alice Feeney's Beautiful Ugly. I've already read Daisy Darker, which was one of her novels, and I enjoyed that. So when I saw this had come out, I reserved it at the library, and this was great. I loved this. It was a page turner, a very quick read. I haven't read a thriller for quite a long time, so it was nice to get back into that fast-paced, plot-driven story rather than very heavily based around the characters. This follows an author called Grady, whose wife Abby goes missing, and a year after she's gone missing, he still doesn't know what's happened to her, whether she's dead or whether she's alive, and he's struggling to write. Ever since she went missing, he's been unable to write. He can't sleep, and he's a bit of a mess, basically. And he gets sent to this island, and he's encouraged to go there by his editor, Kitty, so that he can get away from his life and just be in a cabin on this island where he can devote his time to writing and nothing else. And then various things happen on this island where the people are keeping secrets, and we don't know what they're trying to do with these, by keeping these secrets, what the motive is. We don't know where Abby is, whether she's involved or not. At one point, it made me think of the characters in the film Hot Fuzz. The shopkeeper and the lady who owned the plant. Was it a plant shop? I think it was a plant shop. They were all a bit and twitching and sending each other messages and things. Well, the people on this island reminded me of that a little bit, because they all talk to each other on walkie-talkies and they've all got things that they're covering up. But it was very good. Towards the end, just as you're finding out what's been going on, it has a little bit that didn't sit quite right with me. I found it a bit unbelievable, but I just went along with that. I just accepted that was the story, and without questioning it too much, and went on to finish the book. And I really enjoyed it. It was very fast paced. It was good. Again, quite creepy, and at one point I was reading it in bed at night, and I started to feel a bit weird about what was going on around me because I, live on my own. So maybe not a bedtime story if you're a bit on the nervous side. But it's very good, really enjoyed it, and I gave that one 5 stars as well. So it's been a great reading month. Let me know what you've been reading, and if you'd like me to continue with these monthly wrap-ups. I've started a new book at the end of February, but I won't finish it until into March, and that's Glorious Exploits. I'm only about 40 pages into that, so I will tell you about that next month. Okay, happy reading. See you soon. Bye.